Imagine being alive for 3 million years. While the rest of humanity was learning how to make fire, our protagonist, Mu, was already realizing that he was different. He looked like any other early human, but there was a dark mystery hidden inside him. He didn't just hunt to survive, he was obsessed with it. But soon he noticed something terrifying. Around him, his friends, his family, and his entire tribe grew old. They got weak, they got sick, and eventually they all returned to the dust. But not Mu. No disease could touch him, no predator could kill him, and no accident could end his life. Time kept flowing like an endless river, and while generations vanished into history, Mu remained. Actually, he didn't just remain, he evolved. His body became a mountain of muscle, and his strength reached levels that no mortal could ever imagine. For 3 million years, his entire existence was just three things: hunting, fighting, and searching for a worthy enemy. This immortality wasn't a gift, it was a lonely, painful curse. But strangely, that pain was the only thing that gave him comfort. Eventually, Mu reached a peak where no one on earth could match him. People began to worship him as a god. His power became so extreme that he challenged the heavens, defeated all other deities, and claimed the title of the most powerful in the divine realm. But here's the twist. When you're at the absolute top, life becomes a nightmare of boredom. There was no one left to challenge him. His days of thrill and excitement were replaced by a never-ending cycle of emptiness. One day, fueled by pure frustration, Mu simply stomped his foot. That one move sent a massive shockwave through the divine realm, which was basically a mini-planet. It was a literal world-ending earthquake. Every god, every angel, and even the deepest demons trembled in fear. This wasn't the first time Mu had caused a scene, and the other gods were getting tired of it. Lucifer, the second most powerful being in the realm, was especially annoyed. But Mu didn't care about their politics. His mind was stuck on one thought. It had been over 1,000 years since someone had actually made him break a sweat in a fight. A heavy sigh escaped his lips as he muttered, "Being this strong is such a drag." But then, something clicked. A genius-level breakthrough. If his strength was the problem, the solution was right in front of him. He needed to become weak. If he could find a way to inhabit a fragile human body again, he would have hundreds of rivals and a reason to fight once more. Suddenly, Mu stood up and roared, "Dragon Leam!" In an instant, a massive dragon descended from the sky with a thunderous landing. This was Leam, the top god's assistant, standing 5 times taller than Mu's throne. He looked grumpy at first, but the moment he felt Mu's energy, his attitude flipped. "Take care of everything while I'm gone," Mu said casually, walking away. Leam tried to stop him. He cast the absolute spell to bind Mu, but Mu just gave him a cold, terrifying glance. The dragon's fierce attitude melted into pure terror. He started stuttering, trying to explain that he didn't mean any disrespect, but he just wanted an explanation for the upcoming god's meeting. Mu didn't give a damn about any meeting. He kept walking, dragging the dragon's magical chains as if they were nothing but spiderwebs. Realizing he couldn't win with force, Leam tried to play the victim card, crying about how the other gods would complain to him. Mu turned around and shouted, "I'm not going anywhere unless you want to fight me right now." That was enough. Leam quickly bowed and said, "Safe journey, sir. May your travels be peaceful." Standing before a floating portal to Earth, Mu began scanning the prayers and messages of mortals to choose a host body. Most were boring, but one specific message caught his attention. A message so disrespectful and provocative that it questioned his very existence. Instead of getting angry, Mu smiled. He had found his target. God Mu is officially done with his boredom. Despite his assistant Lim, the dragon's desperate warnings that leaving his physical body behind is a massive risk, Mu doesn't care. In his Sigma mindset, he believes no one in the divine realm is brave enough to touch his empty shell. With a casual goodbye, Mu sends his soul hurtling toward Earth. Meet Li Ho, a 17-year-old shut-in whose only achievement is beating a video game. He's bitter, lonely, and jealous of every game protagonist who gets the adventure and the girls. Standing on the edge of a 3-story building, Lee drops his phone, watches it shatter, and decides he's had enough. He jumps, crying out to any god listening, "If you exist, prove it. Send me to another world." The collision. At the exact microsecond Lee's head hits the pavement, Mu's soul slams into his body. By all laws of physics, Lee should be dead. Instead, the dead body gasps for air. Mu is now trapped in a broken, bleeding, and weak human frame, feeling the agonizing pain of every shattered bone. The weakness he wanted has arrived with a vengeance. Meanwhile, Liho's soul doesn't vanish. He opens his eyes and finds himself in the divine realm. Instead of the afterlife he expected, he is standing face to face with a gargantuan, terrifyingly angry dragon. Lim the dragon is equally stunned. He expected Mu's soul to go to Earth, but he didn't expect a pathetic human soul to come back in exchange. Mu's arrival on Earth was anything but graceful. He swapped souls mid-air and slammed into the pavement with such force that Liho's body was essentially pulverized. Bones shattered, organs ruptured, and for a moment the world went silent. To any normal person, this was the end. But Mu is no normal being. The ultimate biohack. Drawing on 3 million years of physical mastery, Mu did the impossible. He consciously forced his heart to beat, manually pumped blood through his veins, and stitched his internal organs back together using sheer willpower. It was agonizing, but it worked. Covered in blood and broken, Mu stood up. He wasn't angry, he was thrilled. For the first time in millennia, he felt the sharp, electric sting of pain. Now it was time to explore Li's memories and see what kind of life this boy had lived. It didn't take Mu long to understand the whole story, and he decided to head to Li's home to use it as his new base. But walking was a struggle. Li's weak, injured legs couldn't carry him properly, so Mu literally began crawling on his hands like a monkey to keep his balance. Eventually, he reached the house. The first thing he noticed was that a cat had pooped right in front of the window. A great welcome. The place was tiny, like a basement. Mu sat on the squeaky bed and reflected on Li's life. The memories revealed that Li was completely alone, with only one distant relative. He was helpless and pathetic. His only occupation was going to school. The most interesting part for Mu was a memory of a boy who bullied Li constantly. It was like his life's mission: constant fights, humiliation, and pure torture. For Mu, this was the perfect starting point. He was so thrilled that he threw a random punch into the air, but a sharp, piercing pain shot through his hand. It felt like the muscles had torn. Something was definitely wrong. He realized he had overused his muscles while crawling. This body wasn't trained for any kind of action. It seemed Li had never used his hands for physical work. But Mu wasn't angry. Feeling this kind of pain after thousands of years was oddly satisfying. The next day, the police found bloodstains and broken glasses where Li had fallen. They sealed the area and started an investigation. Meanwhile, Mu casually returned to the crash site, but not to watch the police. His real target was the 3-story building nearby, Li's school. Mu had decided to continue Li's routine. He scanned the hallways until he found the classroom. He was so excited that he slid the door open with massive force. The door bounced back and slammed right into his own face. The victory mood was instantly ruined. Staggering slightly, Mu entered the classroom, muttering to himself. His entry caught the attention of a classmate who looked at him with disgust. "You idiot, Liho. Try coming in quietly for once," the boy snapped. Mu instantly forgot the pain in his face and started walking directly toward him. Mu walked straight toward him and stood so close that the boy froze in shock for a moment. But it wasn't just the closeness. It was the creepy, unsettling smile on Mu's face that really terrified him. In that instant, everything became clear to the god. This was the bully from Li's memories, the one who had made his life a living hell. But the bully had no idea that the Li standing in front of him wasn't the same person anymore. "What's wrong with you?" the bully mocked. "Did you forget your glasses, or are you just in the mood to look like a moron today?" Before Mu could say a word, the boy swung a heavy fist, landing a solid punch right on Mu's face. Blood began to pour from his nose and lips, dripping onto the floor. The bully laughed sarcastically. "What, did you sell your glasses for cash, or did you just lose them like the loser you are?" Mu didn't even flinch. He stood perfectly still. He had his own rules for fighting. A fair and honorable battle only begins when both sides have clear intent. He always took the first hit to confirm that intent. Now that the punch had landed, a familiar dark smile spread across Mu's face. Without waiting a second longer, he cut the bully off mid-sentence with a massive punch of his own. The boy was completely off guard. The punch hit with the exact same intensity that Mu had just felt. But as Mu pulled his hand back, a sharp pain shot through his arm as if the muscles were tearing. It was a brutal reminder that he was no longer in a godlike body, but a fragile human one. Hearing the commotion, the teacher rushed into the classroom, screaming for them to stop. but the entire class was already hooked, watching in disbelief as the nerd stood up to the school's biggest bully. Having his ego crushed in front of everyone, the bully lost it. Ignoring the teacher and the crowd, he lunged at Mu with pure rage. Mu quickly defended himself, blocking most of the attacks. He couldn't help but think that if he were in his real body, this fight would have been over in a heartbeat. He tried to activate his god powers, but nothing happened. That realization distracted him for a split second, allowing the bully to land another punch. It wasn't that painful, but it was clear the bully wasn't going to stop until Mu was broken. Mu realized his situation was getting serious. His punches weren't landing, his kicks were weak, and his powers were gone. He had only one option left. Suddenly, Mu lowered his head, targeting a specific spot and taking the incoming punch directly on his skull. His head was the only reliable part of this body. As the bully's fist collided with Mu's forehead, the sound of breaking bone filled the room. The bully's fingers shattered. He let out a scream like a terrified child. Mu felt like a genius. Taking advantage of the distraction, he moved in for the finish. He grabbed the boy's arm and delivered a powerful headbutt. The impact sent the bully into total shock. But Mu didn't stop there. In one swift motion, he snapped his head up, delivering another brutal headbutt right to the bully's jaw. The boy's eyes rolled back, his knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor unconscious. The classroom was deathly silent. No one moved. Everyone just had their phones out, recording the impossible. The weakest kid in school had just taken down the biggest predator. For Mu, it was something else. For the first time in thousands of years, he had fought with everything he had. The experience was unreal. But there was no time to celebrate. As the adrenaline faded, every injury on his body started screaming at once. He had the metallic taste of blood in his mouth, and for a moment he realized that surviving this human life wasn't going to be easy. Yet, surprisingly, he felt good. After such a long, boring journey, feeling this kind of raw pain was deeply satisfying. Mu sat down next to the unconscious boy, looking at him as if he hadn't had enough. Perhaps because the boy had given him such a tough fight, Mu whispered a soft thanks. But then, something completely unexpected happened. Mu leaned down, opened his mouth wide, and bit into the boy's ear. Blood splattered everywhere as he literally tore a piece of the ear away. Mu spat the piece of the ear onto the floor right in front of the entire class. A wave of terror swept through the room. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. To them, Mu looked like a total psychopath. But Mu didn't care about their stares. He remained perfectly calm, wiped the blood from his face, and kept his eyes locked on the boy, who was still unconscious. Biting the bully's ear was Mu's own twisted way of saying thanks. It was a mark. In his world, those who gave him a thrilling fight earned a spot on his list. They became Mu's playthings. This wasn't meant to be a humiliation. It was a form of recognition, a badge of honor in his eyes. Ironically, it was like how humans tag animals, but for Mu, it was about respect and power. The story spread through the school like wildfire. The most feared bully had been brutally beaten by the weakest kid in school, so badly that an ambulance had to be called. Mu watched the ambulance pull away, but he wasn't worried about the boy's health. He was just impressed by how fast help arrived through a small mobile device. As the sirens faded, Mu waved a casual goodbye to his first opponent, silently hoping they might cross paths again. Suddenly, a teacher arrived, boiling with rage. "To the office, now!" he barked. Once there, the teacher exploded, screaming about how wild and crazy Mu's behavior was. He even raised a file to strike Mu, but Mu didn't flinch. There was no fear or regret on his face, only a slight blush of excitement, as if he was already looking forward to his next challenger. Seeing that expression, the teacher froze. He didn't want to risk ending up in the hospital like the other boy. He skipped the physical punishment and simply muttered, "Bring your parents tomorrow." Mu had expected a fight, but when the teacher backed down, he lost interest and walked out. He was given permission to leave school early. Following the instructions, he headed back toward Lee's home. On the way, his mind wandered. Unlike other gods, Mu didn't have full knowledge of this modern world. He didn't quite understand what leaving early implied. Was it a sign to return to base or something else? Regardless, he decided to use the free time to heal and train. His arm was still trembling from the pain. He tried to tap into mana, the divine energy known in other worlds as chi or chakra, the life force that grants humans superpowers. But in this world, mana was useless. Every time he tried to grasp it, the energy vanished within seconds. Frustrated, Mu realized he would have to rely entirely on his physical body. That was his only strength here. Upon reaching Li's house, Mu collapsed onto the bed, knowing recovery would take time. He decided it was time to check back in on the divine realm. In an instant, his soul left the human vessel and returned to his original god body. But the scene he returned to was shocking. Liho was strangling the assistant dragon, Lim. The weak boy who was bullied on Earth was now acting incredibly confident in the divine realm. Seeing Mu, Li let go of the dragon and demanded, "Give me the dragon!" Li didn't realize who he was talking to. He thought Mu was just a random soul passing through. Li wanted to use Lim to control his new life. Mu was disgusted by the boy's arrogance. Without a word, Mu summoned a godly hand, crushed Li in his grip, and made it clear that no one gives orders to the Lord. Ignoring Li's protests, Mu dragged him away. He decided to give the boy a second chance in a different world, though Li clearly had other plans in mind. Soon they arrived at the domain of Lucifer, the second most powerful god in the realm. Mu marched into Lucifer's castle without permission, treating the high god like a commoner. Lucifer was busy tending to his own planet Elmer, and was far from happy with Mu's rudeness. He refused to even listen to them, but Mu didn't care about Lucifer's opinion. "Open the gate," Mu commanded. "I'm sending Li to Elmer." Lucifer reminded him that Elmer wasn't Mu's domain and he had no right to interfere. Mu leaned in close, reminding Lucifer exactly who was more powerful. "If you doubt my strength," Mu challenged, "I'm ready to prove it anytime, anywhere." Lucifer, knowing he couldn't win a fight against Mu, trembled with frustration. Seizing the moment, Mu stepped toward the surface of planet Elmer. Lucifer warned him that touching another god's domain would activate an unbreakable barrier. As predicted, a powerful shield appeared, but Lucifer watched in absolute disbelief as Mu shattered the unbreakable barrier in seconds. "The rules of the universe only change when someone truly wants to change them," Mu said calmly. He released Li and told him to jump into the hole he had just punched into the planet. Li hesitated, terrified, but Mu reminded him that this was the adventure he had always prayed for. Li begged for the dragon one last time to help him dominate, but Mu refused and shot him down toward Elmer instead. Kids these days, Mu thought, they want everything on a silver platter. He looked at the humiliated Lucifer and said, "Keep an eye on the kid," before walking away. Lucifer burned with shame and rage, wishing he had the power to tear Mu to pieces. Lucifer's own story was similar to Mu's. He was once the first demon lord of Elmer, rising above every life form until he challenged his own god. In that ancient battle, Lucifer had summoned a magical sword larger than the god himself and split the deity in two. He had conquered the divine realm, defeating every god one by one until he sat on the ultimate throne, the absolute, invincible supreme legend. But then Mu had arrived. Mu had crushed him just as easily as he had crushed everyone else, shattering Lucifer's image of invincibility in front of the entire universe. Burning with rage, Lucifer made a solemn vow. He would have his revenge on that son of a human, Mu. Back in the present, Mu was riding comfortably on his dragon Lim, heading toward his domain. He had no idea that something was secretly watching him from the clouds, a demon, likely sent by Lucifer, tracking his every move. It was waiting for the perfect moment to strike, just as Lucifer was counting every second until he could avenge his humiliation. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the school bully who had just regained consciousness was also waiting. He didn't just want a rematch, he wanted to see Liho dead. Lying in his hospital bed, he picked up his phone, realizing he needed someone much stronger to teach Li a lesson. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Cheol, a middleweight boxing champion in the youth division. Across the city, Cheol was pouring all his strength into a punching bag. His intense training session was interrupted by a loud, annoying ringtone. Frustrated, Cheol stopped mid-punch, sweat dripping from his body, and looked around to see whose phone was making that noise. A blond boy casually walked in. It was the other Cheol, a boxer with 2 years of experience. He answered the call. It was the beaten-up bully, his voice trembling with desperation. He didn't even introduce himself. He just promised Cheol a brand new phone if he would do one small job for him. Cheol was surprised at first, but the deal sounded too easy to pass up. He agreed. The next day at school, the bully walked into class as if nothing had happened. The room went dead silent. Everyone was staring. Soon the whispers started. Students were mocking him, joking that he had been neutered by the school's weakest kid. He tried to ignore it, but when the jokes got too loud, he snapped. He slammed his bag on the floor and screamed that he could still take anyone on. The class president, a girl with glasses, stood up and told him to either shut up or leave. The bully couldn't believe a girl was talking to him like that. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a chair and was about to hurl it at her when the door swung open. A massive teacher stepped in. The bully immediately dropped the chair and sat down like a saint. The teacher asked the class president why she was standing, but she kept quiet, saying it was nothing. However, as the teacher left, he told the girl to meet him after class. It turned out the teacher wanted a favor. Since she was the class president and trustworthy, he asked her to check on Lee Ho, who had been absent and wasn't answering his phone. In exchange, the teacher promised a recommendation letter for her senior year. She knew she couldn't say no. When she reached Lee's house, she looked completely uninterested. She just wanted to get the job over with. She knocked, and when there was no answer, she noticed the door was unlocked. She stepped inside and froze. Lee's body was lying there, looking lifeless. The room was a mess, crawling with bugs. Lee's eyes were rolled back, and his mouth was wide open. Terrified, she screamed, thinking he was dead. She immediately called an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors realized Lee had collapsed from pure starvation. After God Mu had left the body, there was no one to look after it. They put him on a nutrient IV to stabilize him. Suddenly, the body began to twitch. At that exact moment, Mu returned. Mu opened his eyes, completely confused by his surroundings. He looked down and saw a tube stuck in his arm, the IV line. A god who had spent his life in battle knew nothing of modern technology. He stared at the serum with curiosity and unease. Even without knowing what it was, his godly senses told him that this liquid was entering his veins and being absorbed rapidly. It felt like healing magic, though he knew it wasn't. The girl sitting nearby noticed he was awake. Seeing his trademark creepy smile, she figured he might be a little crazy. "Do you remember what happened?" she asked. Without waiting for an answer, she grabbed her bag. "I'm going back to school to report to the teacher." Mu sat up abruptly and tried to stop her. He didn't really know who she was, but he assumed she was the one who had helped him recover so quickly. In typical Mu style, instead of saying thank you, he made a demand. He wanted to know more about this world and how to get stronger. He ripped the IV out of his arm, gave her that same smile, and asked, "Do you know a place where I can train?" The girl gave him a side glance. To her, he didn't look like an athlete at all, but she suggested a nearby park with a basic outdoor gym. Mu didn't waste a second. He headed to the park and started doing pull-ups, pushing the weak body to its absolute limit. Exhausted, he collapsed on the ground to catch his breath. Mu was actually impressed. To him, these simple exercise tools felt like revolutionary training gear. It had been 4,000 years since he had really paid attention to human progress. In his time, training was primitive and far less effective. He started trying out every piece of equipment, even if he didn't know how they worked. Suddenly, a small stone hit him from behind. He turned around and saw the beaten-up bully. But this time, the bully wasn't alone. He had brought the boxer, Chol. The bully started barking insults from a safe distance, acting tough now that he had backup. Mu remained calm. He picked up the stone and asked, "Who threw this?" Feeling bold because of Chol, the bully shouted, "I did." He started bragging about how his cousin, a professional boxer, was going to kill him. He was right in the middle of his rant when Mu saw an opening. With lightning speed, Mu landed a punch right on the bully's face. The boy hit the ground, screaming in pain as his nose shattered for the second time. That was the price for throwing a stone at a god. While this was happening on Earth, things were getting intense in the divine realm. The regular meeting of the gods was about to begin, but Mu was nowhere to be found. In his place, the small, nervous dragon, Leem, arrived alone to face the other deities. Leem started reading Mu's message, but before he could get through a few words, Lucifer cut him off. Staring him down with pure malice, Lucifer barked, "How does a mere assistant have the nerve to speak at a meeting of gods without permission?" The poor dragon trembled under Lucifer's intimidating presence. Panicking, he clarified that he was only there to deliver a message and meant no disrespect. In a shaky voice, Leem read the letter, but the content was nothing special. It was the usual request from Mu asking the other gods to inform him if they found any worthy opponents, so he could fight them. This set Lucifer off. He slammed his hand on the table. As the second most powerful god in the divine realm, he couldn't stand how Mu ignored their meetings and treated everything like a personal playground. Technically, Lucifer wasn't wrong, and most of the other gods secretly agreed with him, though none dared to say it out loud. Lucifer shouted, "These meetings are for the safety and stability of our worlds, but to Mu, it's all just a game." Even the archer god, the third most powerful, chimed in, saying that the responsibility for Earth lay with them, not with Mu. Lucifer took this chance to dig deeper. He reminded everyone of an incident 1,000 years ago when a massive void creature was about to swallow the Cyclops planet. Mu had shown up and sliced the monster in half in seconds. Lucifer argued that Mu's solo actions back then caused more destruction than necessary. He declared that someone who treats their power like a toy doesn't deserve to be a god. Poor Liam could only stand there in shock, silently praying for Mu to return before things got worse. Back on Earth, the beaten-up bully was back to his usual barking. He screamed at Mu, promising that his cousin Chol, the boxing champion, would kill him. Chol was actually intrigued by Mu's speed and asked if he practiced martial arts. Mu casually replied, "I don't play sports, I just like to fight." Chol dismissed Mu as an overconfident middle schooler. He spat out his gum and took a fighting stance. He threw a lightning-fast punch right at Mu's face. Mu didn't even try to dodge. As a professional, Chol was shaken. He had never seen someone see a punch coming and not move an inch. He didn't know he was fighting a god who lived for the thrill of the first hit. With a creepy grin, Mu asked, "Is hand-to-hand combat your favorite too?" He then perfectly copied Chol's stance and lunged. Chol blocked the punch, but the raw power behind it sent him sliding backward, his arms throbbing with pain. Mu was thrilled. Even in this weak body, the sensation of a real fight was better than anything he felt in his god form. Mu tied his belt around his hand to support his fragile bones. Chol attacked again with everything he had, but Mu was already analyzing him. Chol was fast, but predictable. In a sudden move, Mu didn't just block a punch. He struck Chol's arm mid-swing, shattering the bone. As Chol screamed in pain, Mu watched him with an amused silence. He finished the fight with one more punch, knocking the boxer unconscious. Now it was just Mu and the bully who had started it all. The boy was terrified, realizing his backup was gone. Mu showed no mercy. He used the boy as a practice dummy for his new human techniques, ending the one-sided beating with a brutal knee strike. Relieved but exhausted, Mu headed back to Lee's house. He tried to transfer his soul back to the divine realm to check on things and grab supplies from Liam. He closed his eyes and initiated the transfer, but nothing happened. He opened his eyes to find himself still sitting in Lee's room. He tried again and again, but he was trapped. He had no idea that back in the divine realm, Lucifer's resentment had finally pushed him to act, and the consequences were far more serious than Mu had ever imagined. On his way back to his domain, Liam asked Mu about his journey to Earth. Mu spoke with pure excitement about how much he enjoyed the trip, though he admitted that his new human body felt incredibly weak. During the conversation, Mu ordered his assistant to find a recovery magic orb, hoping it would help his human form heal faster. But there was a problem. While magic items were common on planets full of mana, they were extremely rare on Earth. In human history, only a few people had ever been able to use them naturally, and those individuals were seen as godlike by others. Liam promised that the orb would be ready for Mu's next visit to the divine realm. As Mu stepped off the dragon, Liam reminded him about the upcoming meeting of the gods. Mu casually reached into his pocket and handed over a small letter. Liam was skeptical at first, but we already know what was inside. Mu's usual demand for a worthy opponent. Having finished his tasks, Mu headed straight to the miniature model of Earth. Ignoring Liam's pleas to stay for the meeting, Mu placed his hand on the surface and sent his soul back into Liho's body. Neither of them noticed a tiny demon hovering in the sky, silently reporting Mu's every move to his greatest enemy. Back in the present, Lucifer was analyzing the situation. He didn't know exactly what Mu was up to, but he knew one thing for certain. Mu's original body was currently an empty shell. Mu's absence from the meeting was the confirmation Lucifer needed. This was a once-in-a-thousand-year opportunity for revenge, and he wasn't going to miss it. Without warning, Lucifer activated a spell. Sharp bolts of purple lightning shaped like spears rained down on Liam. The dragon's senses were sharp. He leapt back at the last second, dodging every strike. His awkward, shy expression vanished, replaced by a fierce, battle-ready stare. "What is this?" Liam roared. "Are you declaring war against the god of Earth?" Lucifer floated into the air, brimming with confidence. "I will strip Mu of his divinity myself," he declared. This was an official declaration of war. Liam didn't waste time. He compressed his fiery breath and unleashed a deadly laser-like flame at Lucifer. Lucifer dodged it with ease, but the flame didn't dissipate. It spun around and blasted into the far side of the realm. The explosion was so massive that the archer god had to create a magical shield to protect himself and the others. Lucifer didn't move an inch. He didn't flinch or even create a shield as the shockwaves rippled past him like a nuclear blast. Realizing his first move was useless, Lim activated his ultimate form, polymorph release. Red lightning crackled around him as an intense aura flared up. He was ready to die to protect his master. Lucifer just smirked. "I'll deal with you like Mu's little pet, and then it's Mu's turn to pay for what he did to me." The battle was brutal, but despite his loyalty, Lim was no match for Lucifer. He was trapped in a life taxidermy spell, his body badly injured and unable to move. The archer god sighed, remarked that the place was no longer fit for a meeting, and walked away. The other gods stood frozen in fear. Lucifer turned his gaze toward the archer god, asking whose side he was on. "I'm neutral," the archer god replied casually. Lucifer accepted this, then looked at the remaining gods. "Does anyone else object to Mu's expulsion?" Looking at the broken state of a high-level being like Lim, no one dared to utter a word. Lim, still clinging to life, tried to warn Lucifer that he could never face Mu. Lucifer laughed and revealed a chilling secret. He knew Mu was currently trapped in a pathetic human body on Earth. Lim was stunned. He thought only he knew that secret. Lucifer mocked him, blaming Lim's lack of vigilance for letting the secret slip. In a final act of desperation, Lim swung his massive tail in a surprise attack. Lucifer didn't even look. He dodged with precision and used a magical weapon to slice the dragon's tail into pieces. He kept Lim alive only because he needed the assistant to trace Mu's location later. Lucifer wanted Mu to feel the same humiliation he had suffered. Meanwhile, on Earth, things weren't going well for Cheol either. His coach had found out about the street fight and gave him a brutal scolding, forcing him into a long recovery break. As Cheol left the gym, fuming and blaming Li Ho for everything, he ran into Kang Chul, one of the country's top boxers. Kang Chul immediately noticed Cheol's battered face and asked what happened. Embarrassed to admit he lost to a weakling, Cheol came up with a sneaky plan. He forced himself to cry, letting tears fall to the floor as he spun a lie. He claimed he was trying to help his brother, who was being bullied, and a gang of bullies had jumped him. He played the innocent victim, hoping to trigger Kang Chul's protective instincts. At first, Kang Chul remained stone-faced and walked past him, telling him to be more careful. Cheol's face dropped in disappointment, thinking the plan failed. But then Kang Chul stopped. "Who did this to you?" he asked. The lie had worked. Across the city, Mu was still sitting on his dirty bed, his frustration growing. He couldn't understand why his soul wouldn't transfer back to the divine realm. Based on his vast knowledge, he reached only one terrifying conclusion. His original godly body must be seriously damaged.